As I'm sure you'll know by now, I've been out and about revisiting people to do some follow-up to the 5Q testimonies we did. Simply to ask them what their memories were of the COVID pandemic and what, if anything, we might have learnt. Well, I wouldn't ask people to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. So here is my 5Q revisited. One of the things that's been really interesting when I've met with people is how many have said to me, it's really hard to remember everything that happened during that period. In fact, as I've thought about what I'm going to say, I've also struggled. I can remember those early weeks, those difficult times and difficult conversations as we started to consider what we may stop doing here within this church building. No one knowing what was just around the corner. So not everyone could see that stopping everything was a good idea. But as we now know, it was the right decision, with lockdowns coming very, very quickly after. And then the challenges, especially as James wasn't with us yet, the challenges to consider what we might do as a church to stay connected, to offer something not only for our own congregation, but also for some who had never stepped foot in church before, who we believed would be looking for something during what was going to be a most difficult time, a global pandemic. I also have memories of my own family. My youngest daughter Maisie, who was due to go travelling after finishing uni and yet ended up getting a job at the hospital as a porter. We were very proud of what she did. And then my daughter Megan and her partner Jack coming home to live with us as he finished his degree. He also worked during that time handling telephone calls for Track and Trace, which was very stressful, long hours, often dealing with the frustration many who he contacted felt. So for me, it felt like a very busy time. Our house was a hive of activity, with 3 kids coming home, all of whom worked long hours. Louise and I were also both working for church, and there were many challenges that we all faced here at DBC. Each week seemed to bring change, and we had to work out how to make decisions, provide a connection, and take initiatives that somehow allowed us all to stay connected. I also started a few new things with my own ministry work. We had a once-a-week quiz night with our pub church group, using Zoom and with the kids' help all sorts of technology and video links. I started a virtual pub, meeting over Zoom with around 12 guys, all from different parts of the UK. We met every Friday night for 2 years, and even now we still keep in contact, and we love those few times a year when we meet up. And of course, it was a time where we started these travelling together pages. So lockdown and the pandemic was a very busy time. I sat for many hours in my garden office, creating videos, sending emails, updating web pages, and learning to do things that I'd never done before. We all had to find new ways to express our faith, ways to stay in community, as well as handling the pressures and uncertainty of living not knowing what tomorrow might bring. During that time, many of us, myself included, discovered a great deal of resource from across the world that enabled us to continue to grow in our faith. Perhaps something we would not have done if we hadn't been forced to because of the pandemic. But we also experienced loss, some who are no longer with us as a direct result of those few years. They were certainly difficult times. As I stop and start to reflect, I can't help but wonder if we might have missed something. I keep thinking of how many times I heard the term the new normal. I even did a talk during that time considering what this might look like. And yet did we, and perhaps for all good reasons, just drift back to what we had before, without stopping to ask the question what God might be wanting us to learn? I'm sure we will never quite know. And some are just relieved to be back, and I can understand that. But in my own ministry and through many of the various pioneering groups that I'm connected with, I'm beginning to see an emergence of people who are doing things very differently. Things that perhaps would not have come about if it hadn't been for those few difficult years. Christians who are, perhaps for the first time, seeing their own role in shaping the new normal. And I'm excited. Do you know, I'm optimistic and perhaps more ready than before for whatever God has for us moving forward. Yes, those difficult days seem well behind us, and our memories of those times are beginning to fade. But perhaps it is taking some of us until now to recognise God's hand at work. In us and through us, He is perhaps still shaping the future through our many shared experiences of those pandemic days. And even now we are looking for His guidance to shape what we do and how we connect with Him, how we share our faith with others, and how we take hold of a destiny that He has already ordained for us, to create communities that are perhaps just a little different than those we experienced before the pandemic.